Right, welcome to this YouTube channel, IT on Demand. The last time we looked at interactive consoles in Python. So today we'll be going to the basics, the very basics of what Python means. And I want to appreciate your feedback for those of you who asked questions and who said I should make a video on. Some of you even said you don't even understand the concept. You don't even understand what I'm talking about. And so this video is going to be more theoretical, just for me to explain the things that I mentioned in the last video. And if you haven't watched that video, I will put a link to that video in the description, but you should also see it on the top corner of this video. So today, let's get started. I talked about Python, but I said this is for someone who is entirely new to programming, who doesn't even know anything about programming. And it feels like if you say this is for someone who doesn't understand anything about programming and you're talking about Python, I don't even understand what it means. And if you're like me, the first time I heard Python, what came to my mind was was this. And I'll tell you upfront that Python that we're considering in this course has nothing to do with this. And we're not talking about snakes, and that's not what we're talking about. And perhaps some of you have seen this logo. This is the logo for Python. And the Python we are talking about in this course is actually a programming language. And then you say, hey, hold on, please. What is programming language? What exactly is programming language? I mean, you just mentioned Python. I told you I don't understand Python. And then you're coming again telling me programming language. Okay. So let me break that down a little bit. Programming language, of course, as you can see, consists of programming and then language on the other side. And I think most of us understand what language is. But that programming side of things might be the confusing part of it. But I would foremost talk about language. And so think of this analogy. This is Simbi. Simbi is from the northern part of Nigeria. And the only language she understands is Hausa language. And here is Amaka, who is from the eastern part of Nigeria, and the only language she also understands is Igbo. And both of them want to communicate because Amaka wants to give Simbi an instruction. However, there's no way Amaka would communicate with Simbi because the only language Simbi understands is Hausa, and the only language Amaka understands is Igbo. So for those of you who would be watching from outside the country, I have just mentioned two different languages in Nigeria. And just for the sake of those of you who will be watching from outside, so think of it like Simbi understands Chinese and Amaka understands German. And both of them would like to communicate with each other. Unfortunately, the only language Simbi understands is Chinese. She doesn't understand anything other than that. And Amaka doesn't understand anything other than German. And so there's this other guy called Tunji who is the interpreter. And Tunji now takes the words that Simbi speaks in Hausa if you're a Nigerian, or in Chinese if you're from outside, watching from outside the country. It takes that word because Tunji understands both languages that Simbi and Amaka speaks. And so Tunji interprets what Simbi says and tells Amaka, and whatever instruction Amaka gives Simbi, he gives through Tunji, and Tunji tells Simbi what Amaka wants, and Simbi in turn sends a message back to Amaka, but through Tunji, since Amaka doesn't understand Simbi's language. And so as you've seen here, this is if you look at the communication, we are still talking about human language here. But the communication has been made now. And so this is what language is. It's just a system of communication. So how then do we bring this into programming? And so let's consider this. we have the computer on one side, and then we have you on the other hand, and both of you would like to communicate, and you need someone in between, that interpreter in between, to talk. And of course, the language in between you and the computer is what we call the programming language, just as we use the human language to communicate. And so this interpreter, which was but 2G in this case, could understand this programming language. And so the programming language, I would say, is just a system of communication between you and the computer. So let me break this down further. So look at, this is the computer, and again, this is you. You want to communicate, but there's no way to do that. And the reason there's no way to do that is because the only language computer understands is called the machine language. And the machine language is based on zeros and ones, just as you see here. This doesn't make sense to me as a human being. I mean, I don't know if it makes sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to me as a human being, because this is not my language, but this is the only language that the computer understands. And so this is you at your own hand, where the language you understand is English. Maybe you're from other countries. You understand Russian, you understand German, you understand Chinese, you understand Mandarin, you understand other languages, but not these zeros and ones. This doesn't make sense. And so we need that. This is where the programming language comes to form that bridge in between you as the person and the machine language. And then you talk about this interpreter that we earlier mentioned. And there are lots of these programming languages. And you think of Java, you think of C#, you think of Python, you think of C++, you think of you think of JavaScript. So there are many of them. And you can't learn everything. I'll tell you that. You cannot learn everything. So, but in this particular course, as you must have seen, I told you that you get used to seeing this icon. And this here is what our focus will be. And that's what we'll be considering in this course. So exactly what is programming? Because I mean, I've been talking about programming, I've mentioned programming language, but I haven't really talked about programming, right? And you're still confused and you're like, hey, what's programming? Okay, so programming is an art of writing programs. You say, what? That doesn't make sense to me. An art of writing programs. You've just said the same thing, right? So let's see. Essentially, what are programs? So programs are a set of coded instructions that you give to the computer to do something. So you think of Amaka instructing Simbi to do something. But of course, we'll get to that point to know what the interpreter is. But you think of that set of coded instructions that you give to computer to do something. And that's, of course, you've heard of this word coding. This is a buzzword. This is a word that flies around like anything. I want to learn coding. I want to learn how to code. Do you code? So these coded instructions are what the computer gets. And so let's recall from the previous video, we had a part of this program where we saw the primary prompt and then we typed print welcome to programming. And yeah, this is not the exact text, but something like this. And when we finished typing this, when we typed this and we struck the enter key, we got this boom, welcome to programming. And that was our result. That was the output, right? But what happened behind the scene? So let me take a little bit of time to explain to you what happened behind the scene. And I want to say ahead of time that because of the complexities of computing systems, it's difficult for me to really explain this in the most basic way, but I just want to give you a general sense of what is happening behind the scene, because we would also, just for you to have an idea of what happens. So when you saw that primary prompt and you wrote print welcome to programming and you hit the enter button on the keyboard, what happened was that a signal got sent to the Python interpreter. So let me say this, that when you remember that when we wanted to start this Python code in the last class, I typed in my command prompt, I typed in Python. And when I said Python, it's more like saying, hey, Python, I need the Python interpreter. That's exactly what it means. And so the Python interpreter, as you would see, remember that middleman who stood in between, communicating between Simbi and Amaka. This is the same person here. And so the Python, and this is why you need to have Python installed before you can code in Python. This is why you need to download Python and install Python on your system. And so the signal gets sent after you hit the enter button on your keyboard. It gets sent to the Python interpreter, and that then takes it, and then it brings out this. It doesn't make sense, but yeah, what you wrote there doesn't get into the computer as just WELCOME. No, it doesn't. It gets into the computer as zeros and ones. And so the computer decodes that and says, okay, what does this person want from me? Oh, okay, this person wants me to print out welcome to the programming. And it executes that and sends the result back to the Python interpreter. The process is not done yet, because I mean, what the computer will still send, because it's a machine language, what it will still send is still zeros and ones. And so if it gets back to me like that, it still doesn't make sense, right? And so the Python interpreter then makes it into something that makes more meaning to me as a human being. And then you see that output in the previous video where we saw welcome to programming. And so this here is why you need Python, because we need a way to communicate to the computer. We need a way to tell the computer what we want the computer to do. Of course, remember, that's what programs are. But let me just rewind a bit. If you recall the last environment where we worked, and just forget the bigger space that you see, just that little space where we typed in our code, that place is actually called the command prompt, or what is called terminal. And it doesn't look appealing. In fact, I would say that it's difficult for you to really type your codes. If so, say you have like 100 lines of code, how do you keep typing into that black space? It looks very ugly. And so this is the reason for the IDE. And thanks to the person who asked this question in the comment section, and let's keep the questions coming. I want to make this as basic as possible. If you don't understand anything, please feel free to ask those questions in the comment section. And so this IDE is an acronym for Integrated Development Environment. And so when you think of this integrated development environment, you think of something that helps us to now use to write these programs more efficiently. So the definition I have here is that it's an application that enables us to write our programs more easily. And if you come to think of it, writing several lines of code, in fact, how do I even save what I've written? Did you think of that? If tomorrow I want to start another program, do I go back again to start typing all over again? No, you don't have to do that. With an IDE, you just go into that system and you type your whatever you want to type, and you save it, you run it, you save. That's what an IDE is. So an IDE is just an application. And there are many IDEs, so many IDEs. So I just picked out the popular ones where you have PyCharm, VS Code, Jupyter, you have Sublime Text, you have NetBeans for those who do Java programming language, IntelliJ IDE, we have Eclipse. So these three are basically mostly used by people who write Java programs. So in this course, what I did say we would use is PyCharm and VS Code. However, as this course might grow, I might be looking into doing something like maybe data analysis or data science. machine learning, things like that, just so we can, but I want to take us from the very basics. We will come to that point. We might come to that point. And if we do come to that point, then we would need the Jupyter notebook. And this here is the summary. I hope I have been able to answer all your questions. And if there is still any question that I left unanswered, please do well to leave it in the comment section. And if there's something that you need me to cover, if there's something you need me to explain further, do well to still leave it in the comment section. Let's keep this engaging. And thank you for joining. In case you haven't subscribed yet, I think you've seen that this is going to be an exciting journey. And do well to like this video, do well to share this video, and certainly do well to subscribe. And if there are people whom you know that would strongly benefit from this because of the way because of the peculiarity of this class, please do feel free to share with them. It's a free course. I am not taking anything for this, right? I just want to do it for my own self, like I said, and also for others who might be in need of it. So please share, please subscribe. And yes, do not forget to turn on your notification bell so that when I release the next video, you can get the notification on your phone or on your system that another video has been released by IT on demand. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video where I talk about setting up your environment. And this is going to be the next thing we will do. See you in the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.